Hello, hi everyone. So the objective of this session is not to produce a finalized roadmap. The objective is to produce a framework that we can finalize over the coming weeks, but we need something indicative to start that process off. So you've seen the Miro board. There are three separate timelines, pillar 1, pillar 2, pillar 3, and the pillar, well, I've called it pillar 4, but essentially it's the quality product foundation. And to the left of each of the timelines is the various things that we've talked about as part of that pillar. Now, what I want is to get all of those items on the left moved over and put onto the timeline. And the position that they're to be put on the timeline is when we expect them to be available, at least in some form. So not necessarily totally complete, but to a position where we can actually use them in perhaps a proof of concept, something like that. It's not about all of the interim steps, but when you're putting them on the timeline, you also need to think about how long they would take. So, for example, saying the adoption toolkit is available next month is not viable, given that it's going to take somewhat longer than that to produce it. We can talk about time estimates separately. We don't have time to get into that now. We have half an hour to do this process. So I'd initially like to, for example, go to pillar 1. I can see that a couple of people have joined the board. Jason is one. I don't know who the others are. They've joined anonymously. So you're getting to anonymously place things on the timeline. So looking at pillar 1, can I get you all to come? No. Okay, fine. So I don't know if you can see it on the screen. Simeon, can you confirm is it on the screen or not? No.
Nope, it's not on screen yet, Paul.
Okay, I can just share my screen. Let me do that.
Yes, if you could, that would be great. Again, for those guys who've just joined in, if you go to the Shed agenda and you click on the interactive session that's listed for 11:50 a.m., if you click through that, you'll find in there a link to this Miro board that we'll all be contributing to. For those on Zoom, the link is in the chat there. Yep, we can see that, Paul, but we can't see you.
Okay.
I know how to fix that.
Well, never mind. You'll have to do without seeing me. I know it's a chore, but manage. If I zoom out, you can see that there are the 4 timelines there. And pillar 1, pillar 2, pillar 3, and the quality product timeline. So if I was to look, for example, at the quality product timeline to begin with, because this is probably the simplest one, we can see that there are relatively few items on it. One is, of course, ongoing maintenance, which we expect to continue throughout the life of the product. You can see that the timeline is organized by PIs, PI 20, which we're just starting, through to whatever PI, no, it doesn't matter, a lot. And then at the end of each PI, I've put a time marker, a date marker. You'll notice that these PIs are 4 months rather than 3 months, because I'm told we're moving to a 4-month cycle now. So the next PI, PI 20, will finish in March 2023. So on that timeline, I've already placed, based on what Pedro has said, a couple of markers here for when we expect the VNext Alpha and the VNext Beta to be available. So VNext Alpha, we're expecting at the beginning of PI 22, VNext Beta sometime in PI 23. And then presumably we'd have a VNext proof of concept deployment after that, but we'll leave that for now. Miniloop for use in testing. Now, Tom, I think that that was going to be available essentially now. So if I just drop it there, are you comfortable with that? I'll assume you are because I haven't heard anything else. So if
Hang on.
we go to
Yes.
sorry. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Hey, hey, Paul, quick one, Paul. So beta is Q4.
Q4 there, but Q4 is after October 2023. Yeah.
Okay, we're changing the cycle.
Sorry, please note everyone, we're changing the cycle, so just follow along.
Yep. Sorry. I did. So each PI is now 4 months. So, which is fine. Just makes it a little more difficult for people to adjust. That's all. I haven't been through 20 of them where there were 3 months each. This is a bit of a shock to people, I think. Okay, so does anyone have any particular comments on the Pillar 4, sorry, the quality product roadmap there? It's by far the simplest, I think, not in terms of work to be done, but in terms of planning,
Anyone?
because Pedro had already done the planning for us. Okay, so I'm going to move to V15 is coming in. Cool.
1 second, Paul. Sam has a comment.
Yeah, so we will have a modulo V15 there, Paul. So if you don't
Cool.
mind, I
I can see somebody's adding it in, and if you want to put it on the
Thank
time,
you.
that would be very good. Is it in an appropriate place now?
Sam? Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. So sometime before March 2023, we'll have a V15. Okay. Sorry, I should have locked the timelines in place before I let anyone play with this. Okay. So if I move to Pillar 1 up here, we can see that there are a range of items which need to be put on the timeline. Now, I think that I can put the FRMS proof of concept in reasonably easily because Greg told us it would be somewhere between 3 to 6 months before he could get a proof of concept in place. So if I was to put, oh, where'd it go? Yeah, if I was to put the FRMS proof of concept somewhere around here, that is at least feasible. We okay with that? Sorry, just doing some maintenance. Now, the adoption toolkit, I think that is something that we could have a beta version of. I'd like to see, although I'd like to see progress on it fairly quickly, I think it's going to take longer than we anticipate. And I think we would probably be looking at, let's be optimistic. Let's say at the next community meeting, we could at least see an alpha version of that. Other people are free to put the things in place where they see fit. Don't leave it to me, really, because this is supposed to be collaborative. So we're making some progress here. Hub portals, I think that, yeah, Onga, I think you're right. You need to be focusing on hub portals. I think payment manager portals probably come along after that. I am wondering about a BizOps framework bootcamp, maybe somewhere relatively soon. I think it'd be really helpful if we could have that, because that would potentially accelerate the development of more hub portals and payment manager portals. I think we could build a fintech sandbox fairly quickly if we put our minds to it. It's just a matter of finding the resources for that. So if we made that fairly similar soon, I think that would be very helpful. These two, IAC profiles and on-prem, I don't feel qualified to put in anywhere. I really need David Fry to decide when we could do some work on, when we might have some progress on that.
Paul, it will only happen as part of an implementation program. So your guess is as good as ours.
Okay, fine. That's a good enough answer for now. I'm quite happy with that. We've pushed an awful lot too early, so we need to try and spread things out a bit. So we probably need to move probably the adoption toolkit out, simply because we're trying to take on too much at once there. In pillar 2, I didn't ask Paul Baker to talk about the implementation of the rest of bulk, simply because I think we all understood that had to be done. But I'm going to make an assumption we could get that done by the end of the next PI. I really hope so. Static QR push payments. I think that's more work than we perhaps anticipate. I'm going to push it out to middle of next year. IVR payments, I don't know where that fits. Maybe somewhere all the way up there. Merchant registration, we could actually produce that relatively soon. Merchant acquiring support, I'm going to actually push that out further, put merchant acquiring support in between, because without merchants, the rest is moot. AISP, it needs to be in there, but we're not really sure what the market requirement is, so I'm going to push it way out. Anyone else is perfectly free to change any of this? ATM cash out, we could do that fairly quickly because we have actually already done it. PISP, merchant request to pay. Is that not a relatively straightforward one that we've actually already demoed at least? In other words, as Michael is placing it fairly soon. Okay, pillar 3. Michael, I assume that you're responsible for extending the bars to include an implication of effort or timeline required. Somebody who's done it was aggregators as payment enablers as well. Okay. MOSIP integration is actually a lot simpler than we might think.
Really?
Okay, so all of the pillar 3 stuff is going to be finished by March 2024. That's really good. I'm glad to hear that. Is that realistic? There's an awful lot of tasks going on at the same time here then. There's what, 7 tasks going on in parallel through PI 21. And I'm not entirely convinced that that's
Paul,
realistic. Hello?
when you talk about the MOSIP integration, what's the delivery of that? Make that concrete for me. I know there's work going on right at the moment to make it happen, but you're talking about us having in a sandbox, you're having somebody somewhere knows how to write some instructions to make it happen. You're talking about a video. What actually is the deliverable there?
Yeah. Okay, so the MOSIP integration piece is simply generating the capability to route a payment via a provided MOSIP identity. I do have a question around this pillar 3, because as I said, there's 7 tasks which are going on along in parallel on PI 21. What resource is actually available? Because I don't believe that we as a community have the resource to do all those activities in parallel.
Can I say something about that, Paul?
Yeah, go ahead.
And it is that in a lot of, I mean, so let me take the example of ISO 20022. It's going to be short bursts of activity interspersed by the timetable the ISO organization itself takes to respond to those things. And although we can do some work on moving on to the next phase, that doesn't imply that it requires full-time people working at the same intensity throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same is going to be true of international payments addressing. The same is going to be true of connectivity to other IPSs. In a lot of these cases, the timetables are not entirely under our control.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's reasonable to say it's possible to undertake pieces of this work in parallel, because it doesn't imply that effectively each piece requires people to be devoted to it full time.
Yeah. Okay. I would say also that there are dependencies here which we should perhaps explore. For example, foreign exchange cannot actually be completed until settlement V2 has been completed, for example. So maybe that needs to be moved out a little further. Okay. I am very uncomfortable with all this all at the same time, particularly when that's just within that one pillar. Because if I zoom out and they're on roughly the same timeline, there's a lot of activities on the other pillars as well that are happening in parallel. And I just don't believe that we can meet those resource requirements.
Paul, maybe, have you asked the room how much resources they've already committed to the program? Because maybe there's a magic resource fairy we just don't know about.
You have cut me to the quick, I should say, Paul.
Okay, well, ask the room. What resources are you able to commit? Anyone want to commit to significant amounts of dev effort or thinking? I mean, let me just focus on one then. The adoption toolkit. I'm glad to see that somebody's refined it a little, an outline at least, and then a complete. How much effort are people willing to put into this? I mean, we talked about Jane, we talked about myself, we talked about Steve, we talked about Warren. How much time are people willing to commit to that? Because it could potentially be a significant piece. And I'd ask the same question of every one of these pieces, because if we're relying on just 1 or 2 people, it's not going to happen.
Paul, I think maybe, I mean, maybe what we can do here is assign somebody to take the lead of getting those answers. I don't think we're going to get answers for each one of these in the next half hour. But
Yeah, I know.
we've got the names associated with that written down, and I'll see how many resources. Like I can spend the next week or two, not next week, looking at of the 7 people identified and volunteered, how much time they can provide over the next PI, and then figure out where I think we can get to by the next PI. The other thing that I think is worth saying here is I mentioned it is that the executive series, which part of the Moju training program, which is already a funded project, is supporting the adoption toolkit. And I think that might be something worth taking a look at with all of these as well. Same as there are projects, funded projects in flight, to Warren's point of there are projects in flight that are supporting some of these bubbles. And I think that's probably something else we should identify in the next week.
This was intended to be the next step in the process. So I wasn't trying to achieve that today. That's just it's just impossible to do it in this amount of time. I mean, according to schedule, we're trying to finish this in the next 10 to 15 minutes, so it's completely unrealistic to try and get to that level of detail right now. This is supposed to be input to the next stage.
Hey, Paul. Nhi here from TeslaWorks. I can be part of the conversation and see how we can either contribute or then share the experience or whatever that we can do. But without really knowing too much yet, maybe we're not ready to confirm what kind of resources that we can commit. But definitely could be part of that conversation.
Yeah, there is intended to be a deeper dive into each of these in the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, okay, thank you, Nick. All I'm trying to achieve today is a sequencing and an idea of when it might be feasible to be complete in some form. And then post today, just trying to get commitments from people to work on these and assess people's capacity. I should make it clear that we're not trying to achieve that today. And as I said right at the beginning of this, I'm trying to have product council meetings on each of the pillars after this. And that is where we want to try and thrash out those details. I hope that makes sense to people. The intention is not to try and achieve too much today, because in this forum, it's just not possible, I don't believe, to drive down to that kind of detail. So, as I said, all I'm trying to do today is achieve sequencing and an indicative time of when it would be feasible to produce something, to do some form of demonstration or something for review or something like that. And we'll refine further in product council sessions over the next couple of weeks. So are we happy in pillar 1, making adoption easier, with the sequencing here, at least? Are there any comments around that?
There's one.
Would it be possible to add owners, like to know who's the leader or the owner on the work stream?
Yeah, we can add that. I think you can take it as read from the sequencing in the session program for today, who's going to be the lead in each particular program. But yes, we can add that if you wish. So, for example, Sam, I think you're going to be the lead in everything PISP, for example, in this. I felt there was a comment there that I just didn't hear. Okay, I get very nervous in a process like this when everybody sort of bunches up everything into the beginning of the timeline, because it doesn't reflect reality. I don't believe that these things will be complete in these timescales, because experience shows we all have other things to do, and this will not be something that is the highest priority function. It's always the next delivery, whatever that might be. So I think we need to not bunch everything up, not front load everything. I do not believe we'll have 5 of these things done by the next community meeting, for example.
Paul, one way to filter that is we can ask people to commit to each of those, and if there's a work stream that doesn't meet the threshold, we just bump it down to the next PI.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with the
Okay.
commitment
Well,
not happening today, the commitment happening at the product council meetings.
Yeah,
So-
that's at the product council meeting where we'll be asking you to do that. So there will be product council meetings coming up relatively shortly, one for each of the pillars. And we can do that process then. If people are happy to just accept this as an early draft, first draft, which can form the basis of the product council session, then that's fine. I would be happier moving things out, because there is a tendency to be over optimistic in this kind of process. Pillar 2 feels a lot more realistic. It's a lot more spread out, and it goes out right the way through to Q1 2024, or further even for ASP, which is Q2 2024. That feels more realistic. When I compare that with a nice even flow through to pillar 1, where everything is front loaded, I'm not comfortable. We move to pillar 3. I understand what you're saying, Michael, about a lot of these being low intensity activities, but still, I see an awful lot of commitments there, an awful lot for people to do. Yeah. If we're happy with that, then we can refine it and look at effort required and effort committed in the product council session. Okay. I'm seeing everything slowing down, stopping. So we'll take that as a first or early draft of the timelines, and we'll take it to the product council sessions over the next couple of weeks. I see we have a new person just joined the board, so Greg, I'll give you a chance to make any changes if you want to.
No, Paul, I'm good. I've been listening all along. I just decided to actually join it. So you're good.
Can I make a suggestion, Paul?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, we would not normally accept anything onto a timeline without a clear definition of done, which these, as far as I'm aware, don't have at the moment.
They do not have that at the moment.
Except the ones where people have started, Tom, I'm looking at you, who started to add things that said, this is what it means to say this piece of work is done.
Yeah.
I guess that's the first thing that the product council will need to say.
Yeah. And to some extent that can help to divide, to break down in these blocks into something perhaps more meaningful. So, for example, we've already broken down the adoption toolkit into 2 pieces. Develop an outline, complete it. And they have a different definition of done accordingly. And we can do that with the rest as well. Okay. So this is an initial first pass. We will seek to dive down, get some estimates of the effort that will be required and get commitments from people at the product council sessions. And as Michael says, a definition of done for each of them. And we'll take it from there. So for now, I think that's Simeon, we're finishing at about the time that you asked. So I think we'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. We've made some really good progress. A round of applause for everyone.